Mark, Ed, his wife, Randy. And I'm a master's student at Weiser. And I guess I'll say what I said before, which is welcome to my backyard.
So I'm Lisa. I'm new to Weiser. I officially start July 1st, and this is my first seminar, and I'm really looking forward to hearing what everybody has to say. I think I agree, it's a really important topic.
I'm Marilyn Jackson. I am involved with Weiser for a long time, working in as a student. I graduated and really amazed that we can come together in this pandemic in this way to discuss an important issue. So thank you.
My name's Aubryn, and I'm actually from BC, Canada. And I'm here to listen and learn and maybe add in a few things as well.
Welcome. I have Heather.
I'm Heather, and I'm a postgraduate student. I'm interested in the topic.
Okay, Raylene.
I'm Raylene. I graduated from Weiser 2005, and yeah, John and I have stayed in touch over the years a little bit. Zevki was there. I don't think that we really had any classes or whatever together, but I remember how passionate she was, and have followed her work a little bit. So I'm very interested in becoming more educated, and yeah, just finding out, I think, what all of us can do, especially it seems like with the protests, it's a lot of people across the age spectrum and race spectrum, and it's exciting. So I just want to learn as much as I can.
I'm John. For those of you who don't know me, I'm on the faculty at Weiser. I was one of the co-founders back in 1975 at Weiser. And one of the things that I've always valued about Weiser is the amazing people that somehow find their way to Weiser. It's a diverse and really wonderful group. And Zevki and Monica and Richard and other people that are going to be playing leadership roles today are just awesome, as are all the rest of you that I know, and I'm sure the ones I don't know are as well. Anyway, I'm glad you're all here.
I'm Janet. I'm John's wife. I'm also a nurse that currently works with the disabled. I'm working from home with John and family. I am very concerned. I think this is a great movement, and it's I'm thinking it's part of the fact that COVID, everybody has more time for themselves and to do things and to protest and to try to change things, and it's actually having an effect, and I hope it keeps moving along.
I'm just really happy to be here amongst this amazing group of people coming together for this really important seminar. And I'm a new student at Weiser. I'm a school teacher, high school mostly so far, but next year I'll do junior high. And anyway, thank you for having this.
Hi, I'm Chris Spangler. I live up in Sonoma County, and I'm a friend and colleague. I'm a psychotherapist, friend and colleague of Rosa's, fan of Rosa's, and happy that she sent out an invitation to this, or I wouldn't have known about it. And I'm eager to get some tools for changing things with policing.
I'm Colin. I am Nicole's boyfriend, also kind of quarantine partner. So we've been moving around together. And yeah, I'm getting my BA in environmental studies, and I'm excited to hear what everybody has to say. And I'm really, I can't wait to learn more about all this.
Hi, I'm Nicole, John Billerski's daughter, and also a new MFT student. I've been able to enjoy all the different seminars, which has been really great so far, but I've definitely been looking forward to this one for the past couple weeks. I'm excited to see what everybody has to contribute.
Hi, I'm Sylvia Paloma. I'm the chair of doctoral studies in education for social change here at Weiser. I'm also the director of the Center for Critical Environmental and Global Literacy. We work we have institutes, we work with environmental issues, and then we have projects internationally. Right now, for the last 12 years, we've been working with indigenous communities in the state of Oaxaca in Mexico that just had an earthquake 2 days ago. We've also worked for 10 years in El Salvador, in Guatemala, in Cuba, and in Eastern Europe, and Romania and Hungary. I wanted to say that the other day, I've been involved in teacher education for many years. I was the director of teacher education for 15 years at New College of California in San Francisco. And just yesterday, I received a letter from the Commission on Teacher Credentialing that was sent out with their statement on what's going on now and how they are rethinking how teacher education should be in the state of California to respond to this moment. And I'd also like to say that many people are talking about it as a moment, and I would like to think of it as a movement. And we don't want to stop at this moment, but really build what needs to be built for true equity in this country.
Yes, how are you? My name is Renee White. I live in North Carolina, but I'm from Rhode Island, Sebji's cousin. And I'm here to listen and learn and see what I can take from it so I can work on my end out in North Carolina, what I can do to help stop this, what's going on in this country. I'm glad to be here amongst all of you.
My name is Eleni Offer, and I'm a part-time faculty for Weiser, and I teach at the California State University in Channel Islands, and just started the MFT program, and I'm pretty excited about that. I also am extremely interested in this topic, and I'm excited that that this whole movement is so multicultural across all generations. I mean, it's fantastic. I've been an activist since I was a teeny bopper. I think this is the first time I've seen such broad support for a lot of the issues that I've been invested in for most of my adult life. I mean, all of my adult life, actually, but even part of my childhood. So that's all I need to say. Thank you.
I am Gabriela Hoffmeyer. I wanted to thank Rosa and Sevji and Monica and Richard. Thank you so much for offering this panel discussion for all of us. We really, I'm grateful to be able to be a part of this group. I was in a supporting role with the Center for Social Spiritual Activism with Professor Peter Gable and Michael McAvoy, who sadly passed away. I'm just so grateful to be here with you all. And thank you so much again for the panel discussion today.
My name's Katie. I'm just really interested in this topic. I'm reading Vitali right now. And so thank you for having it, and I appreciate it.
Hello, everyone. I'm Steven. I am about 2 years in at Weiser on my MFT and PCC. I am a 5th and 6th grade teacher, now working at the Liberation Institute in San Francisco, working on my practicum and hopefully finish my licensing there too. And it's very exciting to be here, and it's just great to have this kind of dialogue. I think it's important, especially amongst great minds and good hearts that we have here. So just excited to hear from everybody.
I'm Steven also. I guess for the past 10 years, liberation studies coming from seminary back then up here in Minnesota and liberation theology and stuff. So I've just been very fascinated with this revolution we're seeing at this moment. Suddenly after a lifetime of feeling like the world was super unjust and didn't make a lot of sense. So excited to just be listening with you all today and see what's up. I don't know how I got hooked in with you, but happy to be here.
Hello. Nice to meet you all. I've been invited here by my friend Nicole. So I am a anthropology undergraduate incoming junior at UC Berkeley. I'm just happy to hear the conversation, see what everyone's going to be talking about, especially since I am a young Black male in America. This is something that is really big for me, and I really want to hear just the conversation that comes with it, and I'm excited to see what it was.
Hello, everyone. My name is Mary Butler, and I'm a community activist, and right now working with the Black Repertory Theater as a community outreach liaison. Also very involved with the prayer line I have that keeps seniors and young people updated. And I'm very much interested in the activities and the committees and any way that we could be of help at this present time.
I'm Mona Scott, and I'm a revolutionary trying to take after our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, but haven't gotten there yet. But I'm also a researcher. Excuse me, my dissertation at Stanford was looking at the difference between aspirations and expectations. blacks, we aspire higher even in the literature than non-minorities, albeit we expect less with the racism. I've humbly just been, I don't want to make myself seem like I'm all of that because I'm just a community servant, but I've done research in different places, just like in Great Britain on the Enoch Powell edict back in the day when they said, introduced something in Parliament that blacks and browns would no longer be welcome into Great Britain, just as we saw what's happening now. And I did research. Dick Gregory, I was following his directive. He said, do your own research. So I work with the great Dr. Asa Hilliard. We had a grant under the government to identify covert racism, and also work with Dr. Hilliard internationally in looking at the different approaches to teaching black children from the black diaspora, and then have worked with introducing the paradigms of some people in the entertainment business, and Harry Belafonte, and 15 years of teaching, 5 at USF where with Dr. Njasani I set up the ethnic studies, and my first job at GW with the former Senator Mondale's brother set up their paradigm. So I'm just a follower, not that great, but I keep on. As Christians, we never retire. So I'm just filling in as a director, artistic and executive at my parents' Black Rep that they founded 50 years ago. And I just like to say, in D.C. where I worked, my students at George Washington said, oh, you're from Berkeley, and it was all of that. But Berkeley is one of the most racist places that I found. I lived here since I was 8 and then went to the Mission of Mexico at 15 and then went to the University of Pacific in Stockton, a small university that we were only 3 black girls. So I'm a community person, but I've been able to experience a lot of racism. The Klan ran my parents. Well, they didn't run from in Vicksburg, but they did leave. So my dad first came to California, and I was 2 years old when I came. But I remember my mother taught us to be revolutionaries, nonviolent, even though I've taught Stokely Carmichael community organization when we were in the same age group. I just started at a young age. And so that's who I am. You never retire when you're a child of our Lord and Savior, and when you're a revolutionary in the game, you keep on. I think that people who are non-minorities, I'm glad the light is shining on them, because our most, I guess, circulated writings with Dr. Carol Massey and Dr. Dornbush at Stanford was racism without racists. And some non-minorities don't even know when they're racist. So now I would hope that they would find out, because I think that we as minorities are tired of being so nice. I'm nonviolent, but I think that we aren't standing. This is global now, and I know I went to interview Kathleen Cleaver in Algeria and see what was going on there, and trying to be able to tell my students what Frantz Fanon was talking about. And I've also worked on projects with with Price Cobb and Black Rage. So I suggest everybody read Black Rage again. And that's it. That's it. We're out here on the streets trying to make a difference, but I'm glad that non-minorities are trying to take care of their issues that they've had and being complicit. What is it? You don't speak up? Okay.
My name is Lori Brown. I am the first Black City Council member in the city of Ventura in the 150 years of the city. And as a woman and being Black, you know, with the George Floyd environment that we are living in right now, for the first time I can breathe. And when I say I can breathe, I'm saying I have the ability to talk about the microaggressions and racism and all those little things that happen to me that wouldn't normally have a place or a reason to even say. And I'm so thankful that as brothers and sisters of different colors, that we are all speaking in the same language, and that I don't have to be secret in my room or go speak to my parents about it, or just my Black peeps or my brothers and sisters. I can talk to everyone about my frustrations, and you know, just have a constructive dialogue about what it is that would be helpful, that maybe is a blind spot for others, but I can say this is what I experience every single day. Because I've had people in the past say to me, which made me silent, why does everything have to be about race? You know, and you know, I introspected and I said, well, it doesn't always have to be about race. Even if it is race, I can choose to look at it differently and move on. And I was able to practice that, but this is a time where we can talk about it. And being a council member, I think one of the difficult things is I'm elected in an area that my constituency is not Black. And so I want to be an example for other legislators that Black people don't need to be pushed out of political positions because they don't represent Black people. White people historically have represented everyone, and I believe that Black people can also represent everyone. In this environment of protest and movement, one of the more important things is us coming together. I'm an activist, but when I'm on council, I have to put on my legislator hat, and I need activists to understand that I'm on their side, I can help affect the change with policy. I have the ear of the city manager, the general counsel, the chief of police, and I'm there to have those difficult conversations and help make that warm handshake and make those conversations happen. But it has to be done with due process. And I understand the newer generation is like, no, let's do it now and let's tear it down. But at the same time, you know, revolution has a process. It's a necessity. It's a necessary part of the process. But I'm on the inside, so I want to be able to help affect legislative change. So even when the desegregation of schools, if that judge wasn't there in order to help change that law, when he was there at that time, it wouldn't have happened. I need help. So as a city council member, Black woman, a lot of times I feel alone. A lot of times what happens in politics, your white political counterparts will use your name and your presence and who you are to make themselves look good, to elevate themselves in the media, to say, look, I supported her. I support people of color. I support a Black woman. Oh, look at her, she's great. And then won't endorse you. We'll give you $25 on your campaign. Give your candidate $300. That's the person running against you. Just won't, you know, will tell you. It's one of those things where you can't get enough people to volunteer on your campaign. You get a campaign treasurer, will only go halfway through the campaign with you. And I myself as a candidate had to be my own campaign treasurer, my own campaign manager. When you talk about viability, when you talk about politics and making change and that sort of thing, those bodies that endorse you and those political pundits, they'll tell you, in order to be viable, you have to raise money. You have to have a campaign manager. You have to have a campaign treasurer. You have to have a kitchen cabinet. But they won't supply that to you. But I watched my opponents. They found somebody and did everything for them. They didn't have to lift a finger, and they got elected. When I sit here as a Black woman, I'm like, why am I not getting any help? Why is it so hard? Why am I so alone? I don't want to be alone anymore. And so bringing it back to the conversation about policing. So there was a community group locally where we started a conversation last year because, as we know, George Floyd is like the straw that broke the camel's back, if you will. But it's been happening for years, over and over. It's all over YouTube. They're recorded. I stopped watching those videos after Castile. When I watched a police officer stick his gun in the car to a man who said, don't shoot, I'm letting you know I have a gun. Don't, please. And he just goes boom, boom, boom. I mean, after I saw that, I said, no more. I'm not watching that. So just a little bit about me. I have 3 men, 25, 23, and 20. One lives in Colorado, one lives in Georgia, one lives in California. I worry every day that I'm gonna get the call. And that call is that one of my boys, something happened to them because of a police officer getting killed or whatever. But anyway, that group, when they met, I'm trying to be quick so I can shift the time. We were talking about use of force. We were talking about hiring practices. We were talking about lateral transfers of officers who have a checkered past. Maybe they were in court and they shot somebody and they were acquitted and they wanted to get out of that town, so they lateral transfer somewhere else. And what we were talking about was, how do we make systematic change at the root of the issue as opposed to treating the symptom? What are we going to do policy-wise to keep them from being able to continue in the same vein? Because we can talk about, let's train them to be better, make sure they have sensitivity training. Let's attack this, that, or the other. But the point is, when I asked them about their hiring practices, when we met with the chief, they said that their hiring practices were so astringent and so strict that only a few people get through. But they had 3 academies come through in the last 2 years. All of them were white males. And the class was so homogeneous that it appeared as if they could have even been brothers. It was just like they were identical. So my question to the chief was, are you saying that only white males can pass the exam? And he says, well, they also have a psychological exam. And I think there needs to be a conversation similar to the one that we had about SATs like 20 years ago, that the psychological profile of a Black person is going to be different than a white person. And you can't take a psychological profile when you're hiring officers and apply the same methodology to a Black person and expect them to pass and get through. It's just not fair. That has to be a much larger movement. That's not, and I'm starting the conversation. And the last thing I'll say is, we're having council meetings about the budget because right now, everybody's talking about budgets because we had $11.1 million deficit and we have to make cuts. And we did our best not to fire anybody, do furloughs and all different kinds of things. But one of the conversations was the police department does have the largest portion of the general fund budget, which is about 30% of it, maybe more. So we propose cutting vacant positions. So there's no officers in those positions. We're just not going to fill them. And of course, there's a little blowback, but there's a lot of support for reallocation of those funds. Now, there is no funds, so we can't reallocate them right now, but the conversation now is our officers are have a revolving door for homeless, for mentally ill, and for those who are addicted. They go in and out, in and out. So they came up with this new program to not necessarily let them go in and out of the jail, but try to work with the courts to come up with other solutions like rehab and different things. And so I want to talk about with our county. So in our city, we have a relationship with the county. It's called the Continuum of Care. We opened up a joint homeless shelter, permanent housing homeless shelter, help transition homeless people off the street, treat their addictions and their mental issues. They're allowed to bring their pets, and it's a whole thing set up through Mercy House. So the wonderful thing about the program is that it can be expanded. And I want to suggest that we expand that program to include more social workers, more mental health professionals, and trying to get back at pushing the state and the federal government to renew funding for those groups of people so that we can get back to what we lost when Ronald Reagan closed all the mental health facilities. So anyway, that's my time. I'm good.
Yeah, for Raisha. Hi, everyone. So I'm working, so I'm a nurse, and I was invited by Sefki. Hi, Sefki. My journey started where I grew up in a household that was very religious. I agree with what a lot of people were saying, but I'm more so as a nurse, I'm more so of a mental aspect of the revolution, how people see Black, brown, people like me who are Afro-Latina, how they see us and how we see ourselves. And I say that to say, like, I don't use words like minority because I think that's derogatory to me as a person. I'm not a minority. I'm not minor. Nothing about me is minor. Nothing about me is minor. I did a 10-week course with a group called Sisters Mentally Mobilized. And what that was about was discussing programs and accessibility to Black, Brown, people of color, Afro, diaspora, having access to mental health. And because I work in the medical industry and I see the racism, I see how doctors, especially white male doctors, treat us, treat people of color, treat people who do not speak English, how they disrespect them, how they undermine them. And it's my goal to educate my community. Background with me, again, I grew up, some may say privileged. My dad is an engineer, my mom's a nurse. Grew up in a two-parent home, a house in Brooklyn, you know, things that are rare to people, other people when they hear me say it. And I owe it to not only myself, to my community, to educate, mentally educate others about what is going on in our country. I have a 6-year-old son, he just turned 6. And to see, as was mentioned before, to see the video of when the officer put his knee on George Floyd's neck, I think that was like the catalyst that broke us all the time. Even after his death, we still see it. And to have a Black son, that right there broke me. I literally had a mental breakdown that day when I couldn't watch that video. And I'm a person that doesn't have mental breakdowns. At least I didn't think so. But seeing that video, putting my son in that situation, seeing my son's face on the floor, on the concrete, was horrific. I vowed to make sure that my duty is to educate, is to empower. And I'm so happy to see people who are not of my color on the panel to know that, yeah, you guys are here too because you guys want to know. Because as was mentioned before, we're tired of educating non-colored people. We're tired of it. Like, it's not our job to educate people who are not in our shoes about racism. It's everyone's job. It's the parents who are raising their children to educate children about racism. Because me as a parent, I have to tell my son about racism, and he's 6. He has no idea what's going on. He has no clue. He has white friends. He has Hispanic friends. He has friends of all colors. And when I discuss race with him, he looks at me with his little beautiful brown eyes, and he's like, "Mom, why would someone hate me because of my color?" I said, "Well, baby, you know, it's a mental thing. People have mental issues, unfortunately. And you're not a bad child. You're a good kid. You're smart." And I make sure I give him affirmations every single morning. Put him in front of the mirror, let him know that he's great. He's beautiful. His color is beautiful. He's a beautiful child inside and out. And that is something that we need to do as a community, whether we have children or not, educate others. If you are of the white privilege, quote unquote, make sure you help others. If you have a friend that gets stopped by a cop, stay there, because the cop will act totally different sometimes. Will act totally different. You're there to make sure their rights are enforced. Make sure you videotape, make sure you document everything, make sure you're helping, because being of the human race is about helping. You're helping others. And I'm just so glad to be here so I can hear everyone's input and how I can bring it to the community and change our community for the good.
Good morning. I'm sorry to be late here.
Well, welcome, Ignacio.
Hello.
Ignacio's a doctoral student, a new doctoral student at Weiser.
Hello, everybody. Good morning on the West Coast and good afternoon to everybody here on the East Coast. My name is Sean Walton, and I am very happy to be able to join you guys to discuss this very important conversation that is impacting not only the African American community, but a population that what mainstream media seems to exclude is the entire LGBTQ community, because there are a lot of trans Black women as well as Latina women who are being killed, and it is something that is not being discussed as well. What I will say is this is something that has been going on for quite some time in the United States. But after the murder of George Floyd, it has really started a movement that has become a revolution, not throughout the United States, but around the world. Places that I have been to and was shocked, specifically London. I would have never known that London had such a problem when it comes to racism, and the police, because the British are very stiff upper lip and they do not deal with things as we do here in the United States. But Mexico, I've been to Brazil, I've spent a lot of time in Brazil, and yes, it is a major problem when it comes to race in Brazil. And this is something that they have truly brought to the attention of mainstream media down there, as well as in Colombia. And I was actually speaking to a friend of mine who is Colombian born, but was raised here in the United States. And I was like, I never knew that Colombia had such a major problem when it comes to race. And he said, yeah, it's just something that is not talked about. But this has definitely brought this issue to the mainstream, and it has highlighted what is going on around the world, not just in the United States. And I actually posted this in one of my social justice groups in Baghdad, Iraq. Not a place that I would think of seeing Black people, but this is a problem there where Afro-Iraqis are being excluded and discriminated against. And this is something that has been going on for a very long time. And they are even speaking out about what they're experiencing there in their homeland.
Hi, I'm Melody. I'm a legal aid attorney specializing in immigration relief for survivors. My work involves working with survivors who have had contact with policing, but also who have been victimized by policing. And certainly there's a lot of structural racism involved in immigration law. I'm also the mother of an 8-year-old son. It's been a journey as a white person teaching my white son about racial justice and how to be an anti-racist, and it's an ongoing journey.
Hi, I am here. One, I have twin biracial, half Black, half white sons, and so this affects me deeply. And two, because we've actually had a police incident at our house that was racist and terrifying. So yeah, I'm here for this conversation and any conversation where I can do my part.
I want to add real quickly that Ignacio works with Guatemalan immigrants in East Oakland, so people should know that to have a diverse context.
Right. Okay, yeah, good. So we have a great number of people here, which is wonderful. I wanted to back up and say that Weiser's actual building is on Ohlone territory, occupied Ohlone territory, and where I am right now, I'm on Pomo Miwok, Pomo kind of territory, like right on the border. And I also wanted to say that I forgot to say this, but you were encouraged to say your personal pronouns. So I'm she or they. I really forgot that. And it's also Gay Pride. And I wanted to say something about the, I think, I can't remember who said it. Maybe it was Sean. You maybe talked about Black trans people who are murdered and killed who don't even really get their names said. So it is a very, very, very big issue and a very big concern for me. So I just want to go ahead and go into our panelists. We're so fortunate to have these scholars here. I was thinking maybe Sevgi, you can go first if you feel ready.
Sure, just introduction sort of stuff.
Just launch in, go talk about what you.
Okay, hi everybody, I'm Sevgi. I have spent half of my life basically at Weiser in some form or another, studying there on the board. And so I'm mixed. My mom is white, my dad is Black. My dad was a Black Panther back in the day. And so I grew up with vastly different households. They split when I was 2, and I my white household did not speak about Black culture or anything having to do with that. And then when I would visit my dad, it was, all of it was discussed, obviously. And so, but my time at Weiser and specifically working with John and Cynthia is what sort of really sparked my activism and like that need in me to really delve into issues around race. The very first book that sort of lit that fire under me was Bell Hook's Killing Rage, and Cynthia had me read that, and it was on from there. So I have a nonprofit organization that I formed after Michael Brown was killed. It's called Together We Stand, and we sort of formed out of the need of, I was seeing all of these mothers that were dealing with police brutality and having lost their kids to police violence, and they did not have advocacy or a roadmap on how to deal with it. And when you're a Black person in particular going up against a system that has been formed to oppress you, and you're trying to get justice for your child that was killed by that system, it's an extremely difficult battle to wage. So we started advocacy for them, and most of our work has been working with families who've been affected by police brutality, but also we've done a lot of work in the schools when children have been affected by racism and discrimination. It's such a deep thing to try to pull apart. I have 3 sons and a daughter, and my oldest is 21 now, and he's going into his senior year at the University of Redlands, and he's studying social justice and civil rights law. And he just last week was at a park with his friend and right down the street from our house, and the police pulled up and started questioning him, and I guess somebody had been stealing mail in the neighborhood, and so I guess their thought was, well, let's stop and talk to the Black kid at the park. He's learned to send me a pin of his whereabouts immediately, so that if something goes wrong, I'll know where he is. But seeing, and this is not the first time, won't be the last time, and I know the feeling. Another mom said, you know, when my kid leaves the house, I'm on edge, and it's like you don't really exhale until they walk back through the doors. And that's the reality that all parents of Black children are facing right now, or families with Black fathers and Black brothers. And it's frightening. And I feel hopeful because of what I'm seeing now. You know, this has been going on forever, but I think this perfect storm of COVID and sadly the world having to watch George Floyd die has brought people to a place where the masses are actually seeing what's going on. This has been going on. I mean, another person mentioned Philando Castile, and it's like, we watched a man get shot in front of a baby in a car, and that didn't bring this about. We've seen this happen over and over and over again, and this has been happening in some form or another since the slave patrols, when, you know, government sort of sanctioned policing started, and it's still happening today. I'm hopeful because we're seeing a large majority of the white population being involved and engaged in this. I hope that it continues. I think there are so many levels that we need to address. I think a big one is the defunding of police and putting more funding towards mental health crisis units and addiction services and people that can be called upon when there is an issue. Miles Hull was a young man in Walnut Creek, very close to us here, who suffered from mental health issues, and his family did everything right. They had counselors, they had a relationship with the police department, and he was still killed. And so we need to be engaging with our city councils and with our local governments to require and demand that they put these services in place. We can't have such huge exorbitant amount of our city budgets going to police when the culture of police right now in this country is dangerous. I'm jumping all over the place here, but I think that's such a necessary thing that everybody can do. You can contact your city council. You need to be on top of them. You need to let them know what it is that you expect for your neighborhood and your family and your tax dollars to be going towards. Affecting policy change, affecting how we hire our police officers. We have such stringent educational requirements for so many things, yet if you look at the level of education that's required for most police officers across this country, it's a high school diploma, and we're arming them with a gun and a badge and asking them to, in a split second, make life and death decisions for us. And we are seeing people die, and we are seeing just horrific examples of this on a regular basis. Because of the work that I do, I get videos and people contact me multiple times a day. And this hasn't just started. This has been since we started. I wake up every morning to videos and people asking me to help them because their kids have been killed. This is not a small problem. This isn't just George Floyd. This isn't just Breonna Taylor. This is happening all the time, and our media doesn't cover it. One of the things that my organization has committed to is we help the families that don't get the national media coverage, because they're the ones that really need it. The ones that get the national media coverage get the civil rights attorneys, the high-powered people that are going to give them the resources that they need. But a lot of these families are fighting with nothing, not even enough money to bury their children when they're killed. And it's really frightening. I'm going to give you a statistic. So in New York Times, just looked at things after George Floyd was killed, and they found that while Black people make up 19% of Minneapolis population and 9% of it is police, they were on the receiving end of 58% of that city's police use of force incidents. Let that sink in. And that's not abnormal. That's happening all over the place. And it's...
Savvy, could you restate it? I think you froze in the middle of your sentence.
Oh, sorry, sure. So New York Times just did a study, and they found that Black people make up 19% of the Minneapolis population. 9% of them are police officers, but they're on the receiving end of 58% of the police use of force incidents in that city. 58% are Black in that city, and they're a 19% of that population. And I guarantee you, if you look at all the major cities in this country, it's going to be similar. It's in, there was a huge study done, and it was just published in May, and 95 million traffic stops by police were looked at, 56 police agencies between 2011 and 2018, and found that while Black people were much more likely to be pulled over than whites, the disparity lessened the darker it got during the day. So at night, that disparity was much less pronounced. I mean, it's an epidemic. It's an epidemic. And we have COVID going on, and literally it's killing people, and people need to understand that racist policing is an epidemic for Black folks. And it's really frightening. And I think that mothers watching George Floyd die and call out for his mother, it really spoke to mothers of all races across the world. And I'm hoping that it sits and it hits home enough for everybody that this is how each of us that have Black children feel every day. We are scared. These are our children. And I want that sort of piece of everybody's humanity to sort of kick in. It's Black people are not having conversations with their children that the police are there for you if you need help. It's how do you survive if a police officer stops you? So it's again, we need to get involved on a local level. I think that requiring our district attorneys to investigate the police is ridiculous because they work together, and it's somewhat like asking them to investigate themselves in some way. I think we need independent prosecutors in each city in order to have fair, unbiased investigations into police brutality. And I don't think that we will get that until we do have somebody appointed who is not connected in any way to the local police department to take that on. So I'll pass it to somebody else for now. I've been rambling.
Sevgi, can you, people are asking for if you could share that article or the study that you were talking about?
I can. I don't know how to do it because my computer started freezing.
I think Marilyn found it.
Oh, Marilyn found it.
Yeah, Marilyn found it.
Great.
Yay,
great.
thanks, Marilyn.
Thanks, Sevgi, for your information. Maybe Richard, do you want to go ahead and go next? Richard, are you there? Can you go? Okay, well then I'm just going to go ahead, just for the sake of time. Monica, I want to go ahead and go on to you.
Okay. Richard's there, but he's frozen.
No, he's moving.
I'm not frozen. I didn't understand that.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Sorry.
Monica, if you want to go ahead and go first, just because I don't know, we just got skipped up and you looked like you were ready.
Okay. Well, I'd just like to introduce myself. My name is Monica Scott. I am a graduate of Weiser in the MFT program. I am also about to finish my dissertation and get my doctorate from Weiser. I've also taught on the faculty in the MFT program, specializing in MFT coursework, specifically working with elders and youth. And that's my specialty, is working with elders and youth. I want to just interrupt my introduction and really thank my mother, Dr. Mona Scott, for being present on the panel, and my sister, Sister Mary Butler. As you heard from my mom's introduction, I was raised in a household where I was raised in the civil rights movement. I was at the March on Washington in diapers. I was born in Washington, D.C. I come from a family where we were raised to help others. We were raised to, and it wasn't based on whether it's Black or white. We were raised to be part of the movement. My mom said her proudest moment is when I did my career change from biotechnology to become a mental health professional, more specifically work as a social worker. And that was probably the greatest movement, career change I've ever done. And, you know, I think that the education in that process I got from Weiser. I was not trained as a social worker with Weiser, but as a licensed marriage and family therapist. But most of the work I've done in the community has been in social work. I have a private practice here in Berkeley. It's Abundant Life Therapy Center, and I am in my private practice right now. And then during the day, I work at Roots Community Health. And I work with two main populations. I work with formerly incarcerated folks coming out, providing them mental health. We also have navigation services to remove all the barriers that they have. As you know, Black and brown people are overrepresented in the prison system. We have imprisoned more people. We imprison more people in the whole world, and we imprisoned more people than were ever imprisoned in South Africa during apartheid. So we make it a business through systemic racism to incarcerate Black and brown people. And if you want more details about that, you can read Michelle Alexander's book, New Jim Crow, and find out why that system was set up at the moment of Emancipation Proclamation, so they can get free labor. And America is a country that has never done without having some underclass of people to do all the work so that people can become rich. So as a mental health professional, I probably got more calls in my private practice of families and parents wanting me to work with their kids because they're dealing with the trauma. The number one traumas that most people go through are natural disasters, rapes, murders, witnessing violence. These are the things that we're all going through that right now, just everybody in general. We're in the midst of a pandemic. We have witnessed cold-blooded murder multiple times on our television, and witnessing is not new. I mean, that is why Mamie Till had her son's casket open and for the world to see, yet it still continues to happen. And this is a problem that we're still dealing with. Why? Because we live in a system that has to have an underclass of people, has to subject people so that they can advance themselves, their top 10%. You know, we had that Occupy movement, and boy, they shot that down. Any movement that when people get together and then you know that we're working against a higher class of people that are controlling all of the wealth and power, they try to shut down. And I appreciate the brother that brought up, transgendered lives. I'm dealing with two clients that I have that, just got off BART and were beat up. And when my mother said that, don't be fooled about being in Berkeley, or this is the bastion of liberal thought, things happen here every day. So it's one thing when we look at places like, the fight of like going to eat in a lunch counter, or what's happening down in Mississippi, but there is racism that happens right here in our city. And you might be dealing with a person or a friend who says something that you know is wrong. Speak up, say something about it. I have two children. I have a son who is 24, and my daughter is 31. There are attacks that my son, coming home from Berkeley High, was sitting in the park. He said, I'm gonna just do my homework here. And a lady came out we don't allow people to sell drugs here on the street. This is a street that's blocks away from my house. And my neighborhood has been gentrified, blocks away from my house. And this woman assumed that my son was selling drugs when he was clearly doing some homework. So we have to make sure that no community is exempt from racism. You know, we have to know that we attack it when we see it. One of my favorite, you know, posters I've been seeing is that, you know, I don't know if I can say it right, it was something about silence is, like silence is violence, or white silence is violence, or something like that. And I thought that is profound, because the most important thing you can do is when, especially when you're in whatever your spaces or spaces where you don't see a person of color, is to speak up and say something. Talk about it, you know, say, hey, you know what, John, I know I might have known you for 20 years, but you're wrong. And I'm going to stand up and correct you right here in front of everybody, because that's where people have to start, you know, for this change to take place. Now, I know this is supposed to be focusing on policing. So in my effort to do a little research about it, it's like, how can we change the philosophy about the police? I really appreciate what Sevgi said about the education. Education is a big piece. I don't think we should have any police officer that doesn't have a college education. Sorry, you can't be a police officer. You at least have to have an AA degree. And then I think we need to change the structure of policing. Okay, we're talking about defunding it. Okay, well, if we're taking money away from them, first of all, no police unit needs military weapons. If you're protect or serve, but you have military weapons, then you're waging war against who? Me, member of the community. So what I would like to see is us to get back to community policing. I know there was a young woman on here from Canada, and I did some research about their program in community policing and, you know, how it's set up. But when I looked into, okay, who does community policing here? I found an article about Camden, New Jersey. Now, Camden, if any of you guys know about Camden, New Jersey, they were pretty much off the chain as far as crime rate, violence, everything in the community. Well, 10 years ago, they started a community policing program. They were marching in solidarity with Black Lives Matter. They're marching with them. They didn't have a lot of vandalism and outbreaks because the police are members of the community. So if I am Officer Jane and I'm stopping by and I'm talking to the merchants, I'm stopping by, talking to some brothers that are just out shooting hoop, now I have a relationship with my community. That is how we're going to bring about change. And we need to reinvest in how we educate our police department, how we educate these people that are going out. Because like I said, if I have a relationship with the officer, I don't fear him coming to my house. And like there's an officer that I could say I've called several times to our house in Berkeley for different instances. We've had, you know, we had a man who had a mental health problem who was harassing the kids, calling them nigger, doing all kind of stuff. And so Officer Flores with the Berkeley Police, so I'm gonna have to give him his shout out. He came many times and helped us in that situation. The fact that I know his name is Officer Flores is that's how we should be with the police department. And we need to invest in that type of policing. So that's kind of my intro of what one of the solutions I see to the problem. What I try to do in my work is I'm working with a lot of people with trauma. I'm working with a lot of young people who are living in shelters, and 2 shelters I work with, one Dream Catchers in downtown Oakland, the other one is Covenant House. So I'm working with transitional age youth. Now, a lot of them during this time, they've got 2 big traumas going on. They're scared about COVID, and they're scared of just walking out, leaving the shelter, and, you know, getting hassled by the police. The shelters are in Jacqueline Square. So people are, Jacqueline Square is all built up and people are, people will stop them. So I'm dealing with that day-to-day trauma. And how does it show up for these young people? A lot of it's showing up in their body. And so I'm trying to teach them techniques of how to, reduce their stress level. I've got kids some that are sleeping like a ridiculous amount of time, which is like they'd rather be asleep than be out and about. Some that can't sleep. Some that are so nervous that, they don't know what's going to happen. Some that are scared to go out at night for night jobs. And they're in places where they're supposed to be able to launch. But how can you launch when you're dealing with so much fear? And as a mother, I deal with fear. And as a sister, I deal with fear. I deal with fear when the men in my life, when my brother goes out and they're in what traditionally white spaces and they get stopped, what's going to happen? And like you say, I have taught my son when he first started driving. Literally, I got in the car and I'm like, okay, get in the car. He's like, Mom, I don't want. I said, no, you're going to listen. I said, this is how you put your hand on the steering wheel. Ask to open the glove box. And I put it out to you guys who have sons that aren't African American. Have you taught them that? Have you had that conversation with your son? That's what people are dealing with. That's the stresses that people of color are dealing with. That will you guys who are non-people of color don't have to deal with that trauma of having to teach your child how to might not work, maybe stay alive. You might stay alive and you might not. Mm-hmm. But this is just going to increase your odds. And, so that's my little introduction. I think I'm going to stop for a minute because I'm still dealing with the trauma of everything that's going on myself. And I'm very honest about it. Sometimes I just get too full. I have to stop and rest and then I can jump back in. So Richard, I'm gonna let you take it.
Thank you so much, Monica, and especially like addressing the trauma element. I really appreciate that. So Richard, go ahead and
Thanks, Rosa.
turn.
Well, the first thing I want to say is, as I expected in any case, the participants in this discussion had as much to offer as those of us who were supposed to be the panelists. And I want to thank all of you for that. I also wanted to say that it may not be obvious, and I want it to be clear, that I'm African American. I'm a very light complexioned African American who has lived through the struggle for racial justice in a very peculiar spot. That peculiar spot resulted in my standing in the living room of a college friend who invited me to his home in the suburbs, waiting for his father to come down to greet us. And when he did come down, he was in a great hurry. And he finally said to us, you're welcome. You're welcome in our house. But I just have to tell you that I just finished the greatest book I've ever read. And it proves beyond a shadow of a doubt that apes are superior to Negroes. When I heard that, I expected that perhaps my roommate would say something. He didn't. I thought, should I say something? And I didn't. And one of the values of the moments we're living through now is that those of us who may have kept their mouths shut at other periods in their life are more likely today to open up and say, what in the world are you talking about? I documented the struggles in this book, which you can find in the Weiser Library. So drop down there and get it. It's also available on Amazon. It's called Light, Bright, Damn Near White. And that's, effectively speaking, the experience I've had in interracial justice. Second thing I want to tell you is, it is a damned long road to emancipation. You might have heard that Juneteenth was celebrated recently with sort of renewed zest. And I, for one, am deeply grateful for that. I wish it had happened 50 years sooner. I grew up and knew nothing about Juneteenth. And I don't know how many of you did also, but it is a story in an opening chapter of why it's such a long, long road to emancipation. It was not important enough for the folks who made the decision about slavery to ensure that the folks who were affected by the decision, by the legislation, by the proclamation, sorry, knew about it. And it was subsequently followed by legislation that permitted slaveholders to reclaim their slaves. And many, many blacks, my father included, ended up in Canada, hoping that there they would find a true escape from the threat of slavery. I cannot tell you how enormously difficult it is to believe that this country, which I grew up believing, well, for instance, in, I think it was 52, Eisenhower was president. There was a charge from the Russians that we had a spy plane. They shot the sucker down. And we denied that it was ours. I believed it wasn't ours. I believed we didn't spy, that we were a good country. We didn't need to spy. Why in the world would we? Just the taste of that in the history of each of us. And there is some of that in the history of all of us, that we're good people. We should lead the nation. We have a democracy and we celebrate freedom. Well, slowly but surely, we are learning the hell we do. We are a military nation, and we fight whenever we get good and ready to protect what it is we think is required to defend our freedom, while inside, we do nothing whatsoever to protect and serve the citizens we supposedly are committed to protecting and serving, specifically the Black citizens. My brothers, my five oldest brothers, all served in the Second World War. All of them came home. Their complaints were identical. Why in the world would US GIs treat German prisoners of war better than they treated their fellow GIs, their Black GIs? I can't imagine. How in the world do you ask me to go to war, fight for this country, and then the soldiers who are supposed to be colleagues treat me like I'm a piece of crap? That's the part of our history that has been altogether obliterated. We are slowly but surely recovering it. We have a hell of a long way to go before the recovery is complete. I'm putting on my cap.
What cap? Make.
Yep, there it is. It says Selma, 50th. I went to Selma in 1965. And I marched in 1965. I was scared to death. Not quite to death, I'm still alive. I was scared. Students from Chicago State, where I was then working, went along with me. And their comment, as we hear from students today so often, is, Rev, talking to me, we gotta go to Selma. And there was no debate about that. It was just a question of how we were gonna do it. I loaded up the Volkswagen bus and 4 or 5 students and I headed out to Selma. We got there and obviously found ourselves in hostile territory. But after Selma, we came back to Chicago, and those of you who mourn the death of George Floyd today need to know that in 1968, we mourned the death of a guy who was a sparring partner of Joe Lewis's, who was shot on the streets of Chicago by a police officer, a white police officer, trying to give him a parking ticket. His 6-year-old son was in the vehicle with him. We marched, we picketed, we cried out in demonstrations at City Council in Chicago. Nobody paid one bit of attention. And lest you think that I'm pointing my finger at whites, I'm not. Because the Black community had come to assume that, well, what more would you expect? And so we're not motivated at all to do anything. 55 years later, please don't check my math, I find myself in a rally that my granddaughter has helped to organize in Santee. And she's asked me to come and be a speaker. And I agreed to go. And I expected, in my experience with marches and protests, if you could get 100 people together and get them on the street, you had yourself a major victory. Well, if there were 100 people there, there were 2,000 people there. I had a megaphone. I don't know if 25 people heard me or not, but it was a powerful, joyous celebration of the commitments of a whole new constituency to it's now time, right now, it's time. We see some significant changes in police practices. Those changes in San Diego included the chokehold. Now the mayor says he no longer favors the chokehold. The police chief says he no longer favors the chokehold. The police in San Diego, not one single solitary police officer has been even formally suspended because of an overuse of force for killing a citizen. Not one. Well, it's because there is a police review board that had no power, could not call witnesses, had no authority whatsoever. And they got their information on what happened in the incident from the police. That now is going to change. It has not changed yet, so we've got to keep our eyes open. And while I'm at it, the most significant lesson from my experience is, if you think that democracy and justice will survive while you sit home sleeping, you are wrong. If you are not ready and willing to get on your feet and watch what's going on in your community, and if you're not willing to set a standard of what you really require, the hell with what the administration's saying is necessary or is right. What do you think is necessary and right? And are you prepared to stand up and battle for it? To be unpopular? Right now, it isn't even hard to stand up. Every time you turn around, you run into another protest march by Black Lives Matter. So all you have to do is just be willing to join the parade. But they won't always be that easy, and they won't always be that welcoming. But you have an opportunity right now to get on your feet and let your feet talk for you about how committed you are to social justice. I want to say one other thing, which I didn't say. Dr. King said it. And in my mind, they are the most important words ever spoken by anybody at any time. Dr. King said, we have to get this right. Power without love is reckless and abusive. Love without power is sentimental and anemic. Power at its best is love implementing the demands for justice. And justice at its best is power correcting everything that stands against love. I'm done.
Rosa, may I do a real quick screen share and ask Richard to do 2 minutes on the screen share?
Sure.
Can you give me, I think, or maybe I don't need
We have
permission.
access.
Oh, okay, just a second. Where am I? Richard, do you want to talk about that photo? You'll see the one in the black and white one here.
I know which one you're
But I
talking
know, but I'm telling others the black and white one.
Yes, thank you. You know, I said earlier, I went to Selma in '65 and I marched with Dr. King, and Dr. King came to Chicago later and led a series of very, very violent open housing marches, and decided, because the violence was so vicious, that he'd moved to Chicago, working on open housing. And I, at that time, was leading a neighborhood organization called the Englewood Action Committee. And we were fighting an urban renewal project that planned to use federal funds to demolish 600 plus quality homes recently purchased by Black families who, by the way, at that time couldn't get a mortgage. So they had to purchase this on a land contract from the owner. These 600 homes were to be torn down to create an access road to the parking lot that they wanted to build around the shopping center at 63rd and Halsted Street on the south side of Chicago. There's a Sears there and a Woolworths and I don't remember what all, and Chicago City Bank and Trust. And so the ministers in the community joined in one day And we went to Chicago City Bank and Trust, and just before we were ready to leave the church for to get to the bank, Dr. King's associate called and said, Dr. King wants to join the march. Well, I don't know how to describe the absolute delight and joy that filled that room as we waited for Dr. King to arrive. Well, he did join us, and we marched on Chicago City Bank, and we withdrew our money. And after that, one of Dr. King's staff said to him, well, why don't you burn the bank book? There was a photographer from the Chicago Black Defender, the Chicago Defender, the black paper in Chicago. He took the picture that you're looking at as Dr. King and I held these up in protest for what not only was an incredible distortion of the purposes of urban renewal, but in addition, that bank happened to also be violating anybody's sense of fairness by having very, very few Black employees. And at the time, actually, there was one Black employee, and he was the janitor.
Thanks, Richard.
You're welcome.
Yeah, so does anybody else want to say anything? Lori had to go.
I have something I wanted to say before we end up ending this that I forgot to say, that I keep trying to nail home anytime I'm speaking to anybody, which is that in doing this work with these families who have lost someone to police brutality, I have noticed one thing gets movement, and it's exactly what's happening now, which is public shame and scrutiny. And I feel like we're fortunate that we have all of these videos, and people are taking screenshots of things that racist police are posting. We just had this happen in San Jose. There's a Facebook group with a former and current police officers that are posting horrific stuff. But the reason we're seeing the movement we're seeing in Ahmaud Arbery's case, and the reason we're seeing the movement we're seeing in George Floyd's case, is because, and the reason we're seeing this revolution happening now is because all of these people who sit happily in their positions of power are feeling like they're under the gun. And if they don't take action, they might be the next target. And sadly, that's what we need. And people need to remember that we have seen, not many, but we have seen people or police officers charged. It is very rare that we get a conviction. And so people need to remember that we are at the beginning. We are at the beginning. If you are devastated about what happened to George Floyd, you cannot sit on your hands in a month or in 2 months or in 3 months. If the pressure stops and people don't feel like they might be the next news story, if the pressure stops and they don't feel like they could lose their job if they don't do the right thing, then they won't. Our system is not set up to do the right thing when people of color are killed. Bottom line. And we see this all the time. Like George Floyd's case, I guarantee you they're going to have a change of venue. That change of venue is going to be out of Minneapolis and probably in a white suburb where the jury pool is going to be what? White. So that decreases our chances for justice right there. So I want to nail home that
it is absolutely vital that the pressure that we're seeing now across the country continue all the way through. We will not, we cannot sit back, or it will go back to the status quo. It absolutely will. And all the people, because all of these people, these police chiefs, these city council members, these mayors, whoever is involved, they've been in that position for a long time. And this has not just started happening. The only reason we're seeing movement and seeing most of these people give a damn is because they're worried their ass is on the line.
Yes, indeed.
Lefty, I agree with you. And I was watching an interview with Kamala Harris, and she said the same thing. She said it's going to be very difficult to get a conviction with on the George Floyd case, a case where we saw a man murdered in front of our eyes because, she said, we have a social contract with the police, a social contract that has given them the right to be the law, enforce the law in whatever way they feel they have the duty to do so. So the only way that it's going to change is if we keep pressuring. Like, I know we're in the middle of COVID, and I went out to some marches, and then my sister and I, we had a whole system. We were like, boom, we got clothes in the back room. We were going to pretty much strip, wash, and then do what we had to do. But that's what you got to do. You got to think, okay, am I going to sit and die with a mask on, or am I going to go out and do a plan of what I can do to fight this thing? We can't give up now. So,
go, Mona.
We have to let the fire, we have to really keep going in whatever way we do, in whatever way, but we have to keep putting the pressure on them, because it is going to be so hard. And what you said is, you're right. I think they're going to change the venue, and they're going to put it in some little town somewhere, not like the world hasn't seen it, because the world is addressing this murder that we witnessed, but they're going to put it somewhere, just like they do with Rodney King, to try to get them off.
There was a quote. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, if I had my way, police officers would be taken out of uniform. I realize that part of that is an intent to be sure that a police officer is recognized when they're carrying out official business. But I think they need to find a better way to do it. And connected with that is the fact that so many police officers, and I wish I knew the numbers, but I don't, have previous military history. In the military, in case you haven't noticed, you're trained to kill. And in the military, you're trained to follow orders. And when a police officer who's ex-military sees a citizen on the street and the police officer gives an order, that police officer thinks, we have the responsibility to follow it. No questions asked. And the police officer is wrong. The police officer's only responsibility is to assure that if there's been an offense and they think there's been an offense, they need to hold that offender until a judge and a jury gets an opportunity to hear whether or not that individual is guilty of any wrong. How many police officers approach their job in that way? I don't think very many.
And I think that's why we have to get back to community policing, or start re-educating them. Like, I think police officers need to get out on the street and walk the beat. We need to know who they are. They need to know who we are.
Absolutely.
We need to have a relationship with them. So if you are on the street and you say Dan and Bob have a conflict, and the officer knows Dan and Bob, then he can be a peace officer and handle that conflict. But if you're rolling around in your car and you live in Walnut Creek, but you're over here policing in East Oakland, you don't even want to get out. You don't even want to know the people that you're policing. So when you do get out, you get out with guns blasting. That's the way our police is set up. It's set up like they are at war with the people they are supposed to be serving. And that's what we have to change.
Amen.
Okay. So, hi, I'm a white woman who was brought up, that blacks are to be feared. But anyway, I've learned as I grow up and life can change things. Kind of dark. Can anybody see me in the dark? Anyway, I want to talk about the war type of thing is that the Boy Scouts, and my kids were Boy Scouts, my brothers, and my dad was a Boy Scout leader, etc. But the Boy Scouts were founded by the military. And I started John and I took our child, Kyle, to join the Boy Scouts. And I noticed they always put their hand sort of like this, and they put their head to the flag, and they start repeating what everybody tells them to do and say. And people give them orders on what to do and say and how to be a good Boy Scout. And what I think they're doing is prepping them. So in high school and as adults, they will go to war and follow orders. And like you're saying, so this is the way it starts from how they're brought up.
Yep.
And they join the military, and they think they're saving the world, but they're all on the same program. Right now, I look at Facebook, and I have friends in my horse group that are constantly saying, what about what about the police? They're good guys, and my dad was in World War I and whatever, because the people that are in the military more likely to become police. Their children are more likely to be pro-police, trying to point out we're the good guys, and the blacks are the bad guys. I've even heard this out of police's mouth. We're trying to find the bad guys. And, it's just interesting how it all occurs. I must say I had my kids join 4-H and get out of the Boy Scouts, and my daughter never did the Girl Scouts, because it's more communal. Instead of just following orders, the children, the youngsters, try to figure out what they want.
I just was going to say, I have a cousin.
You look at things from the very beginning.
I have a cousin who lives in upstate New York. And when she married a policeman, the whole family was kind of taken aback and surprised. We were a little bit scared of him whenever there was any kind of family meeting and he would come in. Anyway, this is many years later, and I spoke to her last week on the phone, and I decided to ask her. I said, how does your husband feel about what's going on in the streets and what's happening with policemen? She says, well, I'll tell you, he says that most policemen are really racist, and that they're not good people, and a lot of them are ex-military. So I was kind of surprised to hear her say that so outright, and that this was what her husband was saying.
Yeah, absolutely. This is a really big deal. And I wanted to go back to what Monica was saying about the trauma. This is psychically traumatic for all Black. Yes, we didn't stop the recording, John. Sorry. That this is traumatic for all Black people. And I also wanted to highlight, because this weekend's Gay Pride, that again, there's that piece of Black trans people killed by police that's totally invisible. We're not even hearing their names. And, and also that there was sorry, I got to mute someone. There was these killings have been happening all along. And there's something about the time now that's allowing us to really see it. And the protests are I think, really, really important. The change is, and it does kind of need to continue, because with all of these terrible killings, of children, of Trayvon Martin, of, on and on and on. We just go on and on and on for a really long time about how many people have been killed by police officers. So it's, I just wanted to highlight that.
Even within, I'd say, marginalized communities, I think what we all have to do is really examine some of the prejudices or implicit biases that we might have, and we're in a liberal community. And I have some trans clients of color, and they have express that it's just now people within their own community, within the LGBT community, some people have not given them their due and, you know, and respected them. And now more people are crusading for them. But you're right, like trans people of color, anyone who seems to be occupying that lower level, even within some of our communities, are marginalized. So we need to bring that all up front. There is a reason why you're not hearing about the Black trans members that have been harassed by the police, because of the position they currently occupy. And so the only way that we can see that, I mean, this really gets down to our humanity, just our basic humanity. As we elevate everybody, you can't separate anybody. You have to elevate everybody to know that these things are happening. So I appreciate you, Rosa, for bringing that up, just like the brother that was on earlier, and he brought that up, because I'm dealing with them coming into therapy. I'm dealing with a lot of young people in the shelter, you know, and them expressing their fears of what they're going through. Being Black, being trans, being, whatever, they occupy with their sexuality, with their racial identity.
Okay, great. I also see that, Chris, you've said that there's Confessions of the Bastard Cop by an ex-cop about the police corruption. So there's an essay on this subject, which you're recommending, Chris. Thank you for that. So is there anybody else? Okay, go ahead, Sudhya.
I have a question to the panelists. I mean, we're all aware that we have an administration in Washington that's about the worst and most racist that we've ever had, and a lot of things that are happening are sort of being given license by the attitudes of this administration. And I'm wondering how you see what a transition to a different administration might look like. Just like, there was a point in the last election when we talked about what the difference would be if Hillary got elected or if Trump got elected. And some people said, well, if Trump got elected, there'd be more activism in the streets. There would be more protests. But if Hillary got elected, a lot of people would just go back to sleep. And I'm wondering how you see this moment and the hope that we're going to get rid of this lying, cruel monster. And will that make any difference? Or do you think the movement will still continue? Or if there's a more compassionate, just what do you think?
I think, sadly, history tells us that people who aren't directly affected by things and are able to go back into their bubbles, so to speak, do. I'm hopeful that that won't be the case. I think it's going to take everybody who's in a position where this is not the life that they have to live, where they don't have to worry about their children, where they don't have to worry about the police. I hope that not just putting out a Black Lives Matter sign or going to a protest here and there or talking about it on social media here and there. I hope that they do the work within themselves to understand how they've perpetuated any of this and how deep these systems of systemic racism run. Because I feel that if people can connect within themselves on that level, that it might motivate them more to continue the work. Yeah, I have a lot of fear about the next year here in this country. I mean, clearly people who hold racist ideologies have been emboldened by the current administration, and that goes for the police as well. Someone mentioned, Berkeley. Berkeley is a terribly racist place, and people look at it as it's so liberal. But a group of young Black girls was climbing with their camp up at Indian Rock, and some lady went by calling them nigger this, and this was just last week. And Black Lives Matter signs are getting ripped down in front of kids who are trying to put them up. I mean, it is ugly. And I feel like Trump's administration has like really awakened these folks and their ideologies. And I don't think they're going to go away even when we get him out of office. And I think it's really going to take consistency and accountability to do something long term with what's going on here.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. This is all really, really good. I mean, this discussion I think could go on and on because it's so important, and we do need to make change. And I think, you know, just having these discussions is part of that change. Dialogue, critical discourse is part of that. So,
Richard, what do you think?
Well, I think there's nothing better to stimulate a movement than a stupid enemy. Enemies who do stupid things.
Every day.
And we've had a guy in the White House who's filled that role pretty well. But in the civil rights movement, it's the same story. If we find ourselves thinking that we are in the presence of guys who are okay, they're trying to make life livable for us all, and it's not likely we're going to do much protesting. It's not likely that we're going to see much social change. You know, we work to change things that hurt us. We don't work to change things with which we're comfortable. And so as far as I'm concerned, the transition, of course the transition matters. If Trump gets in another year, I don't know what I'm going to do. I honestly don't know. But we'll survive.
yeah.
Will the planet?
Yeah, I mean, this is all, it's true that, you know, that goes into environmental racism. Okay, Curtis, go ahead. You want to talk? Go ahead.
Yes, hi. Thank you for the invite. Thank you for coming together, everyone that's here. It's encouraging to see you all. And I really don't know what to say. I get emotional every time I just speak. And so I just want to highlight all the stories that were shared today, the experiences from old generations past are critical to the progression, I believe, of the future. I see a lot of faces that, no disrespect, but we'll say past the adolescence age. And so all of our elders here are middle-aged, my family here. We need to be conscientious that the youth, you know, our children, our grandchildren, the neighbors' children, which are our children, they are going to be the true leaders of this nation. And what we lay down now in the height of this reawakening, I'll call it, of our society here, it's going to be a challenge. There are thousands, if not millions, that are against it. But the future, it seems, there's a strong force that oppose the wrongs here. And as long as we remember to reach out to the youth, like they're not present here on the Zoom, and maybe that's just because it's Zoom and technology, but they're out there in the streets, as we maybe once were, putting their lives on the risk just as well as we have. And so remember those, please. Reach out to them. It's not just, these meetings are great because now we can communicate and I think encourage and support one another, obviously from afar, so that helps to keep that empowerment going. But remember the youth, when we close off this meeting and you go out today or tomorrow or next week, what's so critical is the youth. This systemic racism starts at childhood. We send our children to the schools that teach them to dislike themselves and don't value themselves and just become a cog in the wheel and not realizing that's not exactly what we need. So just thank you again for this time. You guys, please understand that all that your information you're sharing, the links I'm looking into, to keep the conversations going and sharing this information with all, because we have a fight that's not going to end for some time. Some changes have become on the books, legislation changes. So we are thankful for that, but that's not without loss that we have to see these changes and more deaths because of George. It wasn't just George Floyd. Many died after George Floyd just to get some arrests. So that there's many untold stories, just recently that continues that I say is our responsibility to speak for them, because they're dying with no one there to be that voice. Not everything is going to catch media, but it's not a matter of media. If we're community, that's what matters. So just please remember that. I don't want to keep rambling because it's pretty much the same regurgitated stuff, kind of like we're saying, but action, action, action. Remember the youth, because we're not going to be here too much longer. I don't know, a few more decades if you're blessed to see that. But what this America, this country is going to look like, it's on us, and it's on your responsibility. Pass it down to those youth, because they need to be equipped for this system as it goes forward. Hopefully there will be some defunding, some dismantling of these systems. And because that's where we're pushing for. The system is corrupt. It wasn't built for people of color, but we're trying to force it to be that now, right? So you got to get involved in politics. It's an ugly place to be, but without our involvement, nothing's going to change. So if nothing changes, nothing changes. We're going to be calling out somebody else's name next week, and the same thing, protesting, but no true long-term effect. So legislation change, educating your children, your neighbor's children, they are yours. They are yours. We are responsible for that. So I say my piece. I appreciate you again. I'm glad I tapped in, and I look forward to just more of this.
Well, thanks so much, Curtis. I'm really glad you came. Really, really happy that you're here. It seems like a lot of people are really saying that right now. So really, really thank you so much. John, do you want to say something?
I want to make a quick comment that strategically, I'm going to express an opinion, and many of you may agree and some of you may disagree. I'm expressing it as food for thought, not as a law or a rule, but it's a concern I have. In the last month or so, as protests have sustained themselves, thankfully, in my opinion, and I think in most of our views, thankfully, the protests have sustained and continued on, and they haven't immediately died out. Maybe they're dying down a little bit now, unfortunately. There's a lot of social ills. There's a lot of injustices. There's environmental problems. There's issues of, is it right or wrong to destroy property? Should people be intolerant and dogmatic toward what other people see? These are all perhaps worthwhile issues to discuss at some point, but I want to express a viewpoint that right now we should stay focused on this particular issue, because this particular issue has been neglected and ignored, not just for years, not just for decades, literally for centuries. And there is some momentum to keep it in people's attention right now. And I think, with all due respect to other important issues that come up in the course of the protests and the discussions, we should probably keep the other issues in mind to discuss at some point. But I'm of the opinion, perhaps incorrectly, that we should stay focused on this right now. So anyway, I just wanted to express that viewpoint.
Thank you, John. So, it looks like we're kind of wrapping up here, although I think there's probably a lot to say on the subject, even more, and it is a long overdue issue that needs attention. But, is there any kind of last comments or things people want to say? Also, I forgot to say that for CEUs, if there are a few of you who want CEUs, so please, can you email me after, and then that's how we'll take care of that. So Eleni, you look like you wanted to.
I wanted to just provide a resource, because I think that so many great people have spoken that I can just not have to share today. But in the interest of trying to give people resources that can actually make a difference, there's an organization called 8 Can't Wait. So it's 8can'twait.org. And one of the great things on that website, and I highly recommend go to the website. So I put it into the chat so people could see it. It's https://8can'twait.org, and then there's some other stuff there. But one of the things that they've done is they had some group that did an extensive review of the kinds of force that are used by police across the entire across the entire United States. So if you go to this website and you put in the city that you live in or the zip code, it's going to give you a list of the types of force that are used by your police department. So they're encouraging everybody to actually contact their local representative and tell them the kinds of force that they want removed from their cities or towns. So that's something that, that everybody can do. You can contact your local representative. You want no more chokes, no more, whatever. They have a list of what your police are doing in every city. So I found that quite impressive. And I learned about it in that town hall where Obama spoke. I can't remember the date, but it was a while back. And this organization is one of the ones that their representatives spoke at the town hall. So that's all I want to say today.
That's a great resource. I'm going to make sure we add that link on our website as well. Thank you.
Okay, Nicole has her hand up. So Nicole and Colin.
First, thank you everybody for sharing so much. I guess to start, obviously there's a huge systemic issue of racism and issues within the criminal justice system. But I guess I just have some questions, and this probably would be to talk about maybe in a different discussion another time, but kind of what does this change in policing look like? The idea of defunding the police. Is it abolition? Is it reforms? Is it, holding the police more accountable, having the community watch the police? Is it the community policing? Do we break down jobs of police? So, what they're responsible, is it do they only work on other groups for only mental health? Are there just people who give out tickets and that's all they can do? Demilitarization of police. So these are kind of just questions and thoughts I have about, what it might look like in the future. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Nicole.
That's a huge, long discussion, Nicole, but I would be happy to do a seminar with you on that if you want to. Just email me.
Okay. Yeah, maybe we have a follow-up.
My little sister is actually the National Policing Policy Advisor for the ACLU, and I think she would be a great person to have come in and speak on all of this.
Oh yeah, yes.
Excellent. Let's all be in touch. I'll contact you. And
okay.
Awesome.
So it seems like we're kind of nearing the end. Unless Sudhia, you want to say something? Oh, you're here.
Younger generation to have people keep an eye on the Sunrise Movement, which is an incredible organization. If you Google Sunrise Movement, they have a few short videos about their work, what they do, and they have lots going. And the other thing I wanted to say is we have a real challenge right now with the reopening of schools. And I think we need to keep our eyes on that because once again, schooling and equity issues around schooling and what communities open or don't open, and what we want education to be turned into, and how in some ways the tech companies think they can take charge of what education should be. So I think keeping an eye on it and I know that Oakland and Berkeley has town hall meetings, but education can become something, really liberatory and really supportive of Black lives, or it could be something different.
Absolutely. Thank you, Sudhir.
Forrest wants to say something.
Oh, Forrest, I don't see you. Where are you?
Rosa.
Go ahead, Forrest.
I actually didn't put my hand up or anything. I would just say thank you to everybody for being here and sharing.
Okay, great. Thank you. So, it seems like, John, you want to say anything?
I just want to say the recording, we will make the recording available, and if you want to make sure that you get access to it, those of you who are new to a Wiser seminar, send one of us your email address, and we can give you access to the recording in another few days to a week.
Okay.
Well, Ignacio did want to make one quick. We're almost out of time, but Ignacio didn't get to say something.
No, just real quick, for Latin America, I'm sorry that I couldn't participate during the process, but I really thank to each presenters. And from Latin America perspective, we always see this internal colonial replication on oppression and how we replicate racism and impose into whatever circumstances. And that's a question that I have. And of course, all the lecturers and the testimonials gave me a lot of ideas about things that I've been dealing through all my life in Guatemala and also Central America, because we do have those indigenous people, and we have this systemic racism. But policing is another issue, and Trump is a worry zone for us, because if he gets elected, all Latin American countries will line out, because everyone is acting like Trump right now. They feel entitled to do that. And the US is always, whatever changes happens here is a change in Latin America or everywhere in the world. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ignacio, for that addition. Sudhir, you want to just say one last thing?
Talking about where race and racism began and the concept of race, and speaking as Ignacio said about colonialism. So I just wanted to put a thought out there, how globalization, especially globalization that's dominated a lot by corporations, how globalization is in fact the new form of colonialism.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, Sudhir. Obviously, we need to continue discussion about this. This is really important, and so I'll look at planning something. Maybe Nicole, you want to help me, or we'll look at bringing everybody back and having further discussion on this. It's very, very important. Thank you so much for everybody being here. Thank you, Sevgi, for being here, and for Richard and Monica for all your expertise and your experience and your words. It's really good to know we have these amazing, brilliant, wiser scholars. So yeah, thanks for being here, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you for putting it together, Rosa.
Together, Rosa.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Contact me also if you have any further thoughts. We can continue the discussion. So
okay.
Everyone, thank you so much. It was wonderful.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.